Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday.
Hello everybody and welcome to Prime Property Finance Podcast. On today's episode we've got somebody by the name of Dave Goodfellow. I've known Dave for a number of years. He's been a client of ours. We've helped him with his projects. Dave's a property entrepreneur and has been in property for a couple of decades and done everything from your standard single let properties through to serviced accommodation and up to large developments. And in today's episode, we just explore some of the bigger things that he's been involved in, how he started and grew his serviced accommodation business, and how he navigated COVID and the various challenges and where he sees that going forward. And also then we spend a bit of time looking at his largest development that he's done to date, one that's in excess of £1 million, all the challenges that came with it and how he's managed to navigate himself back to a successful completion and how that's going. So without further ado, let's get into it and start the conversation. Hi Dave, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Looking forward to this. We've known each other for a bit of time now. Well, remotely anyway, or virtually, I think is the best way to describe it.
Met once, haven't we?
We have met once, yes.
Met once in person, but probably you felt like a partner of mine at one point. We were on the phone pretty much every day, I think.
I think so.
I think so. Hard times.
Exactly. But no, really looking forward to this. Obviously, I know quite a bit about you already, having worked together with you, and just thought it would be a great opportunity really to explore or just share with your background in your chosen area in property. And that's quite diverse. So just thought it'd be a great opportunity to have a conversation and explore that further. One of the things that I think is a good place to start is going to be around your serviced accommodation business, which you've had for a little while, started back in November 2018. Do you want to just talk us through how that came to be and the journey you've gone on over the years?
Yeah. Very, very simply, really, the serviced accommodation business came about because I was kind of into property before I had a job, but it was very much a side hustle. And my missus fell pregnant. I was working away all the time and I needed to get a job that gave me a cash flow strategy that brought me back home. And I wasn't, going away on a Sunday evening, coming back on a Friday evening, being like a zombie for a day and then perking up and then going away again. So I used to work all around the country. So I needed something that was kind of quick cash flow. I say quick cash flow or something that I could build into replacing my job, if you like, or my income. So I started my serviced accommodation business in November 2018. I had a couple of properties already in Chester, rental properties that I owned, a small rental portfolio that I turned into serviced accommodation. But then I realized quite quickly that wasn't going to be enough. So decided to get into some of the other strategies. So purchased another property, was refurbing it. It took longer than what I expected. Just needed something to fill those gaps. So rent to rent come about. So renting, other people's properties, selling them by the night on Airbnb and booking.com or through our own direct bookings website, and making the margin on them. Once we'd done that for a little while, I then went on to managing other people's properties. Once I'd had the business behind me and we knew what we were doing, we didn't just go straight in managing other people's properties because we wanted to make sure that we were doing it properly.
Yeah, so it's a clear, obviously, cash flowing strategy. I think what's good is going into this with an objective in the first instance rather just aimlessly trying to do something. So you were quite clear from the outset as to what you were trying to achieve with that. Rent to rent, you mentioned there. which is increasingly popular, not just in service accommodation, HMO, and other spaces as well. For those listeners that are unfamiliar with rent-to-rent, and you did touch upon it real quick, do you want to just explain a bit more around what rent-to-rent is?
Yeah, for sure. So rent-to-rent is essentially when you take over somebody else's property that's not your own. You rent it for a market rent or for whatever rent you want that to be, as long as the deal stacks. Normally, we do ours between 3 and 5 years now. We don't mess around with sort of like 12-month contracts or anything like that. And you sell it by the night rather than the month to either leisure guests or contractors or anybody who wants to stay in the area. And you make the uplift on the margin, or the margin. So for essentially, if you were to keep things simple, rent it for £1,000, sell the property for £3,500 or £4,000 a month. You take out your costs and your linen costs, your cleaning costs, and any OTA fees if you've got any and not booking direct. And then you're left with, and that's your cash essentially. Hopefully that kind of explains it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it does. It does. OTAs are online travel agents.
Sorry, that's a bit of service accommodation jargon there. So you have to put me right, mate, if I get them, if I put them in. But yeah, OTA, definitely. Online travel agents. So that's your booking.coms, Airbnb, Verbo, all those types.
Yeah. Okay, fab. And rent-to-rent is, as I say, increasingly popular for those who perhaps don't have the capital resources to go straight into properties.
Yeah, so relatively low kind of entry level. You don't really have to have that much money. You have to have some. I hear it bandied about a lot, no money down deals. I got into this, and a lot of that's not very accurate. You do have to furnish the place and put your month's rent up and all that sort of stuff, especially when you're first starting out, because people aren't just going to trust you. So, you do need to, but considering what it would cost to kind of buy a house or anything else, it's a relatively low entry level.
Yeah, barriers are a little bit lower. But I guess what I'm interested in as well is how the first person, and I'm sure you got knocked back on several occasions when you presented this idea to property owners. What was the first, when you first started doing that? Was there a concern or an anxiety of getting knocked back all the time? How did you get into that? How did you overcome what challenges would be there?
Great question. So I think at first, letting agents, they were kind of like my best friend. So I go around letting agents because obviously they've got loads of people on their books already, talking to them about what we do, looking at company let agreements, so putting companies into properties and all that sort of stuff. Obviously being very open and clear that we would load them onto Airbnb and all that sort of stuff as well. And we then do company let agreements through letting agents. As we got a little bit bigger and we had a bit more behind us, we'd then go direct to landlords. We'd had a bit of a name for ourselves in the local area. We get recommended to other people, and we get recommended around the city, and we grew from there. Really, it was always quite difficult at first because I suppose if you take, for example, an AST, everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows what it's about. When you hear the word Airbnb, people think parties, people getting their houses trashed and all that sort of stuff, where the reality is it's actually the complete opposite. When we just would sell, I've got this 7-stage sales cycle that we used to use, which came from a sales background, where we just used to go through a process and show people what we do. We take people out to houses that we'd had for 12 months and show them what they look like, and they'd be in pristine condition. And, and then you just have to tell them that, if you take an Airbnb client, they can review you there and then. What other business in the world can just review you on the spot, slate you if they want to, and you didn't really have much to be able to remove that. So we had to keep the houses in showroom condition. So you go through all those and you do a bit of scene setting with them and make sure that they understood the things that were the benefit from serviced accommodation as well.
Okay, no, that's interesting, because I can imagine back in 2018 as well, whilst today it's far more popular, serviced accommodation, and there's other reasons we'll come on to as to why that may be the case through policy and whatnot. But I can imagine that would have been an even tougher sell back in 2018, where it was less of a done thing, if you like.
It might have been a tougher sell, but it was easier to get properties. There wasn't as many people doing it. So, where you had a big bank of properties to go at, now you don't have that so much because there's so many people doing it, or even landlords now, because of all the new legislation coming in for, buy-to-lets and the money getting squeezed. They tend to do it themselves, and they'll do it not very well, which gives the market again a poorer name. And people just think nowadays that you can take your buy-to-let property, stick it on Airbnb, and you make a load of money. Well, it doesn't quite work like that, and they find out that the hard way. So in some respects, it can be easier because people know more about it nowadays, but in other aspects, it's more difficult because more people are doing it. And we've become overnight professionals, by the way.
Well, exactly. Obviously, 2018 starting, we're now in 2025, so that's a 7-year journey. There's a big thing that happened in between this part, COVID. Do you want to explain what that was like and how you managed to navigate that successfully?
Yeah, absolutely happy to. So it was a bit of a scary time, I suppose. So we were, just under 2 years into, I was less than, so I started my business and I was still working. I worked for 6 months until I left my career or my job. So I was about 18 months into being, my own boss and out of the corporate world with the comforts that come with it. And then, Boris Johnson comes on to the news at night and says, right, all business travel and all leisure travel stops tomorrow. And you're like, well, what? That's 100% of my business gone. So, like, literally that night, you could just hear. We've got this piece of software called Slack, and it used to notify us when we have a booking or a cancellation. They have 2 different ringtones. You could imagine what was going off on that night. So that was just ding, 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 ding. It was just cancellation. So we just sat with my head in my hands for about 24 hours thinking, what the hell are we going to do? So I remember sitting on a kind of call with my old business partner. He's left the business now, but sitting there, and there was a couple of us around. And I turned to them. I was like, I'll find a way of filling these properties. And I think back then, we didn't have as many, maybe 15, 20 properties. It wasn't a huge amount, but that's maybe a huge amount to a lot of people. But for us back then, that was not, from where we are now, wasn't that many. And I just said, look, I'll find a way. So I just started thinking about, right, well, who's going to be busy right now? What are the industries? Well, the NHS are going to be mad busy because they've got all this stuff going on with, with COVID, people coming into the hospitals, they're having distance from their families and all that sort of stuff. There's power stations, they can't close. We'll probably need more power because everybody's at home and using all the things, whatever, supermarkets, and then key workers. So I phoned up the NHS and I did a deal with them to put anybody that had to distance in any of our properties. That filled half of them. And we were getting really good rates as well. Made a really simple pricing structure. give it to the NHS. My mum was a nurse at the time, and I said, look, if I was to speak to anybody about accommodating people, who'd I speak to? She said, oh, the accommodation officer. Who else would you speak to? I said, well, all right, Mum.
Thanks for that.
Who'd you speak to about accommodation? The accommodation officer. Okay. So I phoned them up, got in touch with them. They were overrun, didn't have enough places. Anyway, we filled half of our properties with them. And then we had the key workers register, went through all them, phoned up the travel lodge because they had to close because they were a hotel. They weren't self-contained.
Right.
Got some good leads off of that and filled the rest of my properties with key workers. And then I didn't have enough properties, so I had to go. So I was on Facebook on my groups. Don't know if you remember me on the groups, and people, if they were handing their keys back, come to me and I'll take the properties off them. And we like quadrupled the size of our business, like over the 2 years that was COVID. It was crazy. So I suppose in adapting to the stuff that's around you and solution. I think being an entrepreneur is like you are just a solution finder. Somebody puts a problem in front of you, you give them a solution for it, and that's kind of what we did.
Right. No, I can imagine the first time you heard that news, you just thought, oh my God, this is over. We're done. What on earth are we going to do to actually, as you say, finding a solution to that and realizing actually we can grow during this phase because there's such a demand way over in excess of what we had.
And what COVID actually did for the industry as well, because all the hotels shut, all the contractors that normally stayed in hotels then found Airbnb, or well, not Airbnb because it wasn't open, but they then found us. Everything that we were doing, and then that helped us at the back end because more people knew about us then. So it made it easier in some respects.
Yeah, and also the staycation was a big thing, wasn't it? Whilst some of the travel restrictions were lifted, still overseas travel wasn't really a thing because the restrictions could be replaced and so on. So people were staying local. Yeah,
when the floodgates opened and everybody was able to travel around the country again, that was just crazy. Good crazy for us, but crazy nonetheless.
Yeah, no, it's but again, we still had times though where businesses were open and it would close back down, I guess, because you focused on the key worker. That was going to be the constant all the way through it. So this wasn't more of a touristy sort of proposition, although you obviously took on some tourism. Mm-hmm. The backbone of the business was built on a sector that wasn't going anywhere.
Exactly that, yeah. We've had kind of like a bit of a reinvention of the business a number of times over the last 7 years. We started off with very much a leisure bias business, and then we quickly realised that we needed to do leisure at the weekends and business travellers during the week, because that was kind of like a sweet spot before COVID. And then COVID came and it was the NHS and key workers. And out the back of COVID, when that all left, it was very much a leisure market because everybody wanted to go on holiday and be out. And I suppose now it's that leisure market because everybody started coming to doing serviced accommodation, and it got very, very saturated at one point, especially sort of maybe 18 months ago. We had to switch again, and we've switched to a more contractor, I call it short-term lets now, or mid-term rentals. Mid-term rentals where, we have contractors that are working in the area and they might come and take the place off you for 3 months, 6 months, a year. We've had some that have been 3 years, and that's the kind of area that we focus on now, because although it's not as much price per night, they're lower, but your operational costs, because you're not changing every couple of days, you've got one change every 2 weeks. You don't have to have as many staff because you haven't got people phoning in all the time. It's actually more profitable from the contractor market.
Right. And I guess it's more predictable as well. I guess there's other areas that will affect? I appreciate, obviously, and this was something I was going to come into in a second, it was around how you assess whether a property is suitable for the type of let that you're looking for, whether it be contractor, tourism, and whatnot. We have many conversations with people who sort of see the service accommodation as a sector, not necessarily because it fits where they're at and the property type, but more so because it cash flows better. I'm going to turn it into a service accommodation because it'll do this.
Yeah.
Should we chat around that not all properties are equal and that not all properties work under service accommodation, and what you'd be looking for?
Yeah, so that's a really good topic. So not everything works, not every property works, and not every area works for serviced accommodation or short-term lets or mid-term lets. Just because you've got a house or a property doesn't mean that you can just flip it over and it works. There's certain areas, there's certain things that I would say you need in certain areas for it to work. We do a hell of a lot of analysis, which you've seen from the hotels that we've opened and some of the stuff that you've got us the mortgages and bridge loans and all sorts of different things. We have to have that analysis in the background to prove that it works, right? We'll use price labs. We use AirDNA, price labs, property intel, all sorts of different software. As you can tell, that's not my area. That's young Harry's area. So I've forgotten the names of the stuff he does. But everything's got analysed, and we look at what the demand's been on the previous year and what the forecast is for going forward for the next couple of years. And then we'll look at price per night. We'll look at occupancy rates, even down to like how much they're paying for cleaning on the property, and how many nights they book for on average. And there's so much data out there to support making a decision on a property. It's not just that. And I'll tell you something: we turn down more properties than we take on.
Yeah, what I found interesting. So I looked at short-term let service accommodation on a property which was, on the face of it, perfect. In my mind, it would work all day, every day. Based in South Wales, it was in a place called the Mumbles, which is right on the seafront. Should have worked all day long. It wasn't until you started digging around the actual data through the AirDNA and other sources that it became very apparent that actually it wasn't going to work as a tourism thing. You cannot build a business on 2.5 months worth of reasonable weather, not even then guaranteed, that somebody's going to turn up and turn only on weekends.
Yeah.
You just instantly assume because it's in a very nice place, that business has got to run all year round, not just for 2.5 months.
Exactly that. And the other thing that people rely heavily on is the OTAs. So your Airbnbs, your Booking.com. If you don't have a direct booking strategy in the background, you're scuppered. You can't just list stuff anymore and just expect. You used to be able to. When we first started, you used to put stuff on. When we were a little less experienced, you put stuff on Airbnb, Booking.com. It just used to fill. It was very, very, very straightforward. Now it's a different ball game. So much competition out there. You just have to be on point.
Yeah, and then regulation, a topic which divides opinion, I guess. I'd argue for those people who are serious about the space, welcome regulation. For those who are perhaps less serious, should we say, or more dabbling, see it as more of a hindrance than anything else, or what's the point in this, etc. What have you seen happen with regulation in this space over the period that you've been involved?
So there's always been regulation around, right? Now, so you've heard of the 90-day rule in London. Nobody takes any notice of it because they put it in place, wasn't policed properly. Nobody really takes any notice of it, so they just crack on. We don't have anything in London. We choose to run our business in a very legal way because I want to sleep at night. I don't want that taken away from me somewhere. So, but what the problem is with the regulation that the government put in place. There's not enough people to regulate it. So nobody's checking it. So people just carry on. That being said, I absolutely welcome regulation. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a great thing for the industry. If it's policed properly, the new fire regs and stuff that have come out, came out a couple of years ago, maybe now, maybe a year ago, 2 years ago at the max. I can guarantee you now, 50%, maybe more, 50 to 75% of operators will either not have done anything or won't even know about it. But who's policing it? Nobody's checking it.
No, and I don't suppose it'll come to light until, unfortunately, there's an accident.
Exactly that. Exactly.
That's the issue, isn't it? It's all, I wouldn't say it's fine, but as long as nobody's getting hurt and so on and so forth, it's when something goes wrong, that's when this is really going to end up in the news or under the spotlight. The 90-day rule, just to come back to the London piece, am I right in saying that it can't be let out for more than 90 days in a year?
Yeah, so it's a cumulative rule. So the 90 days is, it can't be let out 90 days, but that doesn't mean that, if you took a 2-day booking, then you have a 2-day space, then you have 2 days. That only counts as 4 days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, how well is that policed? Airbnb police it because they have a ticking time thing on Airbnb. Booking.com don't. None of the other TAs do.
Okay.
The only one that really clocks it is Airbnb.
Right.
So, and the 90-day rule, you can only let your property out within Greater London for 90 days or less. If you take a booking that's over 28 days, that's not classed as a short-term rental.
Right. Yeah. Because of the 28 days, it's a 1 month booking.
Doesn't count to your 90 days.
Fascinating. And I guess this is one of the challenges, and we see this with HMOs, there's so much nuance in your area as well. So you get the national rules, but then you also get the local nuances as to where they've got various different licensing and so on. And we've also obviously got the introduction of the new planning class in Wales as well, which you're familiar with, C6.
Very much so, as you know, C6.
So, whilst people criticise Wales for some of the measures that seem as punitive, I get it. I understand why that is seen to be the case with Rent Smart Wales and all of those bits. But you can understand why they're doing this, because in particular in more rural Wales, I think some of the percentage or the numbers are quite frightening as to the amount of property that's taken out of circulation purely for tourism, whereas local people then can't afford to pay to stay in their own areas.
I actually welcome it. The new use classes in Wales, they've only done one thing for us, and that's helped us with our business, because it's reduced the amount of people that are doing it, and especially with the second home council tax now as well.
Yeah,
that's made people sell up. Obviously, it's making more houses available for locals. But what I also find in these areas, the local towns are built on tourism. So you can't take it all away, because the towns, if you took it all away, would just collapse. So there's got to be balance within any of this legislation, any of the new use classes. There has to be balance.
Yeah, and we talk about these things all the time around unintended consequences. So whilst it's done with the best intention, still there are consequences that have not been well thought out that manifest itself as a result of the changes. So obviously you grew your portfolio to, as you say, quadrupled in size through COVID. And then I think you am I right in saying you sort of retracted a little bit around the size of or the types and the properties you had?
Exactly that. So we came out the back of COVID. We'd quadrupled our business. We had about 60 properties as we came out the back of it. We then grew to 100 properties over the next sort of 18 months to 2 years. And what I quickly found. But we grew most of that through managing other people's properties. I got out of a job to not work for somebody else and to have freedom. And what I quite quickly realized is as soon as you start managing other people's properties for them, you've just created a job for yourself again, right?
Yeah.
So we had a few different clients on that were just a nightmare, if it's fair to say. And so we went through a process of slowly reducing the management service and reducing the management services and buying our time back and increasing our rent to rent stuff. So we went back to about 65 properties after getting rid of a load, now up to like 75, 80 again. But it's much better proportioned now. We do still have some managed stuff on, but it's clients that we pick and choose to work with rather than just taking anything on that we did at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's a much easier and better lifestyle off the back of it, let me tell you.
But do you think that you had to sort of take what you could get in order to get yourself to a position where you can then pick and choose, or would you have picked and chosen first?
We thought that we took a load of properties on, but what we slowly realised that when you're managing other people's properties for them, there's a hell of a lot more operational time it's more time consuming from an operational perspective, because you're constantly dealing with clients, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with their cleaners that can let you down. What you find is that the amount of time that you put in is a lot more, so you need more staff. And actually, when we looked at it, we made more money taking it back to, the 60, 65 properties rather than we were doing with the 100 with management, because it was so time consuming with everything. And yeah, we have more time to concentrate on the business and, look at the stuff that was making us more money. And it just, I see it all the time now out there where people, get into serviced accommodation, they grow really quickly. And I'm like,
yeah,
they're going to see, it's going to happen. And I see it quite a lot with people who grow very quickly. They then realize, oh God, that was a big mistake. And then they start. But I think, we wouldn't be where we are today without those managed clients and how we grew quite quickly and how we got a name out there and all that sort of stuff. So you can't really look back and regret that sort of side of things.
Yeah. And I guess the point being is it perhaps just a necessary process of that, because you talk about others who follow the same path, and no matter how much you preach and advise otherwise, and possibly vanity or ego comes into a little bit as well, that you're growing at a pace and so on.
I think that's the thing, we've got 100 properties and, I think it's 100% ego. And it was for me at the time. But I suddenly realised that it wasn't about how many properties you got. It's about the bottom line. It's about how much you're making and how happy you are, and what time you've got, rather than running around like a headless chicken for other people, making them money, have a bit of better quality of life, take a step back and actually put more money in your pocket,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Hoorah is what I say to that. But you're also very, very hot on processes. So a lot of automation involved in the business, clear as to what people's responsibilities were. Do you want to give us just a flavour as to the size of the team and how you came to make those processes run as smoothly as possible?
Oh, great question. So size of the team first. So there's me, who's the owner, Harry and Dave, who are two business partners. Harry's the technical side of things and the techie person and the numbers man. I'm the deal maker. I'm the one who goes out and gets the deals and makes the deals and I'm the money man, I suppose.
Yeah.
Goes out and gets the money. And then Dave is the person who makes sure the properties are designed right. He's very good with, interior design and very handy as well. So in terms of any maintenance that's required, he does it himself or has got a maintenance team around us to make sure that everything's it's kept to the right standards, I suppose. So that's the kind of directors, management team. We've then got 10 cleaners who clean for our properties in Chester, 5 virtual assistants, a head housekeeper. I think that's it. That's the employed team, and then we've also got subcontracted teams outside of that. Our accountants, our maintenance teams, our cleaning ladies in different areas, our maintenance people. I think that's about it.
That actually surprises me. In I shouldn't be surprised, but it does. 65 properties needs that kind of a workforce to keep it all ticking over. And I'm not sure whether listeners also would be, wow, that's actually 65 properties doesn't sound like a huge figure considering some of the people's portfolios that we deal with. But actually, when you think about it, the turnovers and everything else that comes with it, if they were 65 standard AST, long-term lets, you could do that on a fraction of that workforce.
Put it like this, right? So with a long-term let, you've got one person going in 6 months. That's the worst case, right? They're sometimes there for like 2, 3, 4 years. Some can be there for 20 years. Ours can be there for 2 nights in these properties. So 60. We never have a situation where you have 65 or nearly 80 now. 80 properties with 2 night stays and all of them having to be changed over. But if you take the mix, hence we had more than that until we started doing what we're doing now, which is a lot more long term, and we're only cleaning every 2 weeks and changing every 2 weeks now and whatnot. So you can imagine what we were like when we had 100 properties. And it was mainly leisure stuff we were doing. I think our average nightly stay was about 4 nights.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder if, obviously it's short-term let, service accommodation, whatever you want to call it, as a strategy, people need to understand the level of work that goes into handling that. Yes, you can get it and you can hand it over to a managing agent who will do that for you, and it's their business. Of course, that possibly is a short-term let strategy, but that is not you operating the business. And I think the key point there is short-term let is more akin to operating a business with all the operational stuff that needs to go into it, whereas a standard buy-to-let is more of a property investment,
yes,
rather than a business. I think it's fair to say.
So I'd also just add to that I actually don't think serviced accommodation is a property business. It's hospitality. So hospitality is 24/7. You've got to be available 24/7. If something happens in that house in the middle of the night, somebody needs to be able to do something about it. So it's a hospitality business. It sounds awful, but it's running a real business. You've got all different things that go with it. You've your marketing, your account. There's so many aspects to it. And all the systems that you need to be able to run that business effectively is, it's an eye-opener for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think what people, again, generalizing here, but there's a confusion between holiday let and serviced accommodation. A holiday let in its traditional sense, and the mortgage also supports this, is typically someone like myself working in a day job full-time, earning a salary or whatever it may be. You take your income, then you'd have a second property which you would let out, but you're not there living on the income necessarily. It's a bit of an extra. Perhaps you've got a parcel of land next to yours. Yeah, and it's as you say, a side hustle.
Yeah, 100%. And you'd give it out to somebody like cottages.com or Sykes Cottages, and they do everything for you. They organise your cleaning, they book your property, they do all that. That's very much a hands-off. But that comes with its costs, right? Because you've got to pay them to do that. It's normally about 18%, I think. Or is it 25%? I don't know. It might even be 25% with Sykes and the likes. You're losing that amount of revenue from your business, or you take that off your bottom line. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and we've spoken about the mortgages, obviously the different type of mortgages that come with that, whereby you've got, you've got your holiday let mortgage and how that's accounted for. I won't go into the detail, but once you've got 4 or more properties, typically you can't get any more holiday let. It's perceived to be more of a business, which lends itself back to the conversation we've had, where we're back into the specialist world again then of mortgages. No, that's fab. I think for this part of the service accommodation then, just to wrap that up, because you've got a bit more to talk about as well, is what are your 3 main takeaways from this space and the 7 years you've spent in there that you would want to share with listeners who are either A, in this space and trying to grow, or B, considering it as a potential use for their properties?
If you're looking at it for a business to grow, the marketplace is completely different to what it used to be. So you've got to be able to reinvent yourself if markets change. So that's one. It's reinventing your business and being able to adapt to different situations. Of course, we've had that. We've had the leisure market. We've had the COVID. We've had leisure back after COVID, and then we've gone into a sort of midterm contractor market. So it's the reinvention and having that entrepreneurial spirit to be able to change if you need to. If you are looking for growth in this area, it's an old cliche, but just having the right people. This is a people business. It's not yes, we have nice properties and we have all that, but if you don't, you can have the nicest property in the nicest location, but if you don't have the right people behind it, managing it and making sure that they're filled and everything looks great in them and all the things that I talked about before, you're going to fail miserably. So having the right people around you, making sure, just the next one about, making sure you make the right investment in the right area.
Sure.
So whatever you think a property will do, whatever you feel a property will do, you're probably wrong. Okay. Okay. You have to back that with a professional who can give you analysis, numbers, and not just looking at previous, but looking at forecasted numbers going forward too, so you know exactly what's coming. Revenue is revenue, and what you think you can make out of a property is just pie in the sky until it's absolutely kind of confirmed by an industry professional. Don't just get into something on what you think is going to happen with it.
And even then, forecasting is exactly that. They're educated guesses based on the data that's available.
Look at the Woodlands, Trinity Avenue. Look at what we forecast for that. It was good what we got for it, or what we're getting now. But we would never have imagined that. So, but that could have gone the other way.
Correct.
Yeah. One thing we know about a forecast, they're 100% of the time always wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. Even variances within it and so on. No, I totally agree. And I think, you mentioned the Woodlands. It's a great segue to, we'll talk around that in a second. But just to recap the points you just raised there, I think one of the things that jumped out at me as well is you talk about reinventing yourself, was your willingness to pick up the phone and sort it out, i.e. go and drum up new business. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think others may believe that just putting it on an OTA, on an Airbnb and so on, and just sit there and let the business roll in, so to speak. Yeah. You need to drive people to your product, which is your property, mm-hmm. in effect. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is a big differentiator from what we hear. Absolutely, being a people business, it is hospitality at the end of the day. So, and people have hospitality expectations as well. So you got to live up to that. So yeah, I think there's some great points off the back of that. And yeah, not all properties do what you think they're going to do, as we'll come on to with the Woodlands. So no, thanks for that on the service accommodation. Really do appreciate it. As mentioned, you do other things in property, namely development. Yep. And one that we've been working on for some time now, Trinity Avenue or the Woodlands, depends on what we call it on what day. Do you want to?
Depends how I'm feeling. The Labour of Love project.
Do you want to just set the scene on that one for us?
Yeah, for sure. So the Woodlands or the Trinity Avenue down in Llandudno in North Wales. An opportunity arose 5 years ago now for me to purchase an old hotel that was derelict. And when I say derelict, it was literally falling apart. But I got it what I thought was a really good price at the time. I paid 225,000 for it, which included all the fees, the lot, for a 500 square meter, 2 semi-detached buildings, old Victorian buildings, beautiful buildings with they're joined in the middle. So purchased it back in just as COVID started, thinking that everything had opened up and we'd be getting started pretty sharpish. And obviously we didn't. So took a couple of years to kind of get to a position where we had it started, and that was for a number of different reasons. One, I got into it with the wrong people and had to get out of that. Secondly, there was planning issues with it, which didn't materialize till it was only about 6 months ago that we finally got the tick in the box for that, because they changed their use classes. As we were 3/4 of the way through the build, and they changed the use class and come out and said, you need planning for this now. What do we do? Anyway, we got C6 in the end. But yeah, that was a labour of love. It's taken sort of just under 5 years to get to the opening. We opened in February this year. And the good news is we filled it within the first week, and it's completely booked by a corporate client now till the end of November, which, we couldn't have asked for any more. I think we'd forecasted, going back to the forecast, that we get about 24 grand a month out of the property, which is it's 2 old buildings, but there's 11 apartments made up of studios, 2 beds, studios, 1 beds and 2 beds, or 10 apartments, because we had to put a refuge in just in case there's a flood, Mark.
Right.
If you remember.
Yes.
Never had a flood in Llandudno, but just in case there is one, we had to put a refuge on one of the apartments there, so people could jump into it if there was ever a flood. That was one of the planning hoops I had to jump through. As you can tell, I'm not really happy about that. But anyway, we filled it. It's now got people in there till the end of Feb. We were expecting a forecast of about 24 grand a month, and it's doing around 33,500 pound a month now. And it has done since February, and will continue till the end of November, and probably stretch past that from the clients that we've got in there. So cracking result at the end. Mark's worked really hard on getting me a valuation through. We just got our valuation back.
We did.
Days ago, or when was it? Last week?
2 weeks ago now, I think. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. I know.
We were expecting about 1.3. We ended up getting 1.56 million.
Yes.
And the other great thing was that I wasn't expecting like a commercial valuation on it, which we ended up getting. You got that through CCB?
Yeah, Cambridge Counties are the lender. Just on the commercial valuation thing, because that's a topic in itself, probably. So there are certain scenarios where a commercial valuation is entirely the right thing to do for a property, and it's usually when the income is linked to the property use. So in this instance, whilst it would have been a house at some point in its history, it clearly is no longer a house, and therefore can only be traded and operated as this. So it's more like a hotel than it is a house. So that is absolutely the right methodology. We often have that conversation around HMOs, where it's a 3-bed HMO, semi-detached house, and someone wants a commercial value, whereas ultimately it's still just a house. So that, yeah, I won't dwell on that too much, but that's a topic we talk about a lot. So you mentioned about obviously getting into business with someone and then no longer being in business with that individuals or that individual. Is, whilst we don't need to go into the detail of that, I guess, what are the learnings that you've had about, because joint ventures are a big thing in property, where people perhaps have the property but not the money, and then somebody's got the money but not the time, and so on. So it makes sense that they get together and do the work. What are some of the key learnings, or what would you do differently before getting into a joint venture / business partnership with someone?
Great question. So if you're ever going to get into a joint venture with anybody, sharing a business or anything like that, I would say there's the first thing that you need to do is just make sure that you treat them as if they are, not treat them as in physically treat them, but in your mind treat them as if they're a robber, a thief. They're going to do you over. They're going to knacker you, and they're the worst person on earth. Okay, use that as your baseline. Anything you get above that, then that's a bonus. Make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure you understand the person that you get, people that you're getting involved with, and get recommendations and anything that you can do to paint a picture of those people. Make sure you do that. Because what people tell you and reality can be completely different. And that's what happened to me. And it won't happen again.
No, and whilst that sounds cynical, and I know some of that is tongue in cheek, but the point is very much true in so much that if you spend the time at the front end to treat it as a proper business partnership, you've got, put it in shareholder agreements, joint venture agreements, whatever the wording may be, but ultimately a contract between you both. And I guess one of the more important things in that contract is the dissolution of the agreement. So in the event that something that you don't agree or the relationship breaks down, how are you going to treat that going forward? And you're better off doing that at the beginning where there's no money involved.
Yeah, exactly.
That rather than when there's hundreds, maybe millions on the table at that point.
If I'd had that,
it becomes
I'd have been much better off on that, 6 figures better off on this project.
Yeah. No, this. So yeah, definitely the shareholder agreement. Obviously, do the due diligence, personality, and so on. One of the things that I've come across a few times actually is checking each other's credit scores.
Yes.
Because
credit scores and company's house.
Yes. As to the, if there's a history of insolvencies and so on and so forth. Whilst that may not seem particularly important when you're having that conversation, when you come to get a mortgage and you are both need to be named on the mortgage and one's credit score is particularly not great, should we say, then you're really going to struggle to get the required finance, and property ultimately requires finance of some description, whether it's your own cash or a mortgage. You're going to be using finance. So that's something to bear in mind there. So yeah, a few things on the JV. And then obviously you had quite a big vision with Trinity along that. And I know it's been a journey, I think is the best way to describe it. You've had a number of challenges along the way. Any funny stories you want to share around some of the things that have happened, or perhaps not so funny?
Funny stories. I don't feel so funny back when we were at. The place was like a sieve before we were opening it. So every time we turned something on, there'd be another leak somewhere, hole in the wall.
Right.
We'd just finished painting, get it all decorated, ready for opening. Turn the water on again. The whole apartment leaking everywhere. You got me on the spot there. I've got loads of funny stories. Oh, the guy that was running the project just. I don't know if he'll never listen to this. So we call him 11 Arif, because if you'd been to Tenerife, he'd been to 11 Arif.
All right. Okay.
one of those guys. Whatever you said to him, he'd done it, but then he'd done it better or done.
Right. Okay.
It's funny.
And also Trinity as well. I think it's fair to say is one of your biggest, the biggest project you've probably undertaken. How did you find the step up from going from doing, standard properties? You did some conversions of commercial into 3 flats as well, but this to be 10 or 11 apartments is a level up again. How do you find that? What challenges did that bring with it?
I think, do you know what? When you think about it, it should have been easier doing the bigger project because you've got project managers, architects, what they call the people who look after the money.
Accountants?
Not accountants. Quantity surveyors.
Oh, QS, right. Okay, yeah.
Quantity surveyors. And your power team around you should, take all the headache away from you. I think with this one, it didn't. It's just the way it fell. So it should take all that headache away from you. So when you go into a bigger project, there's more risk involved to you personally because of the money involved with it. It should be easier because you should have a professional team on site that take care of everything for you. The one thing I will say about that professional team and comparing it from a smaller project to a bigger project is nobody will look after your money the same way as what you do.
Yeah.
Listen to that again. Nobody will look after your money in the same way that you do. And that's one of my biggest take-ins and learnings from the project. I think I could have saved a fortune on it if I'd have done it myself.
Well, as you were talking, I remember a conversation we had several months back now where exactly that, that you managed to source, I believe, some of the either kitchens or doors or something like that at like nearly a third, if not less.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Oh, no, the EPC was one of them, I think.
I'll give you the EPC example because that was just mind-blowing. So I had a quote through from some said person for, I think I can't remember, it was 2,800 plus VAT or 3,500 plus VAT for an EPC. And I got the EPC done from a local guy in the area for £120.
Mental.
That's a kind of prime example of me going, what? Let me just check that out. And if I'd have done that more on the project, I think I'd have saved a hell of a lot more. And I didn't, which is something now that, hindsight's a great thing, right? But it's one of those things that you look back on and go, right, maybe if I'd have looked at that, maybe if I'd have taken a bit more there and taken a bit more time and whatnot, it'd have worked out better.
Yeah, but I equally, that's experience as well, right? So I guess from the outset, because you're making a step up, you're leaning on these professions to sort of take you to the next level, if you like. You're relying on their skill set and their expertise and what have you. Perhaps on the next one, you'll feel less like that and be able to challenge them more confidently because you're going, well, hang on, this doesn't feel right now. Whereas before, you perhaps didn't know any different.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the point. Challenging people is not professionally challenging people. I think is the better way to frame it. Is not necessarily a bad thing. And if you don't understand something or if something doesn't feel right, I guess having the confidence, or it's your money. You should be asking the question to understand actually, is that right, or is there a better way of doing it? Because that sounds expensive. And
it comes down to, remember what I said earlier about having the right people.
Yeah.
Challenging. You shouldn't have to challenge those people that are working on your project for you. They should be doing a professional job and doing it correctly, right? So again, it comes down to the individual people. The project that we did at Two Hunters Walk, the person that was on that was the right person. Trusted them implicitly. I knew he was a bean counter. You could tell he was down to screw. Also, he was also a friend of mine, so he would never have done anything like that to me. So, but yeah.
And I guess it's oversight. Really, is something that if you went into another project, there'd be a degree of cynicism in there, I suspect, or a bit of suspicion, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, you would be probably better aware now to have better oversight of things, and just even, not checking everything, but going over at a high level and going, actually,
exactly that.
4 doors, that much, really, that sort of thing. So, no, that's fab. And then I guess just to wrap up the part around Trinity, and we could probably go on about that for ages because it was such a big project. And we've touched upon some of these, I'm sure, but in the same theme, what are the 3 main takeaways from that project? If you were to, in fact, let's change that. If you were to do that again, what would you do differently? 3 things.
What would I do differently if I did it again?
Not start.
No. I mean, it's worked out well in the end. I can't complain with that. So, I think I put too much trust into the people that were running it at the time, and I didn't go down there enough. It's an hour for me, and I should have been down there twice a week, and I was going there once a month. So that's the first.
Right, okay.
Make sure that you're on top of stuff and keeping on top of what's going on, and just turn up. Don't tell them you come in.
Right. Yeah.
It's your project. If you want to turn up on site, turn up on site. So that's the first one. Second one, I went from a single properties to 11 apartment scheme, and maybe should have done something in between, like the 2 Hunters Walk, which was a much smaller scheme and on my doorstep. Maybe should have just done that first, and not gone back over £1 million development. So that would have been the next step. And then last but not least, I'm going to say it again. Nobody looks after your money the way you do. So double check what's coming in, what's going out. Your contractors, it's within your rights to be able to ask people why they're spending money on stuff and how much it's costing, and giving you the breakdown of that. So one more time, nobody will look after your money the way that you look after it yourself.
Yeah. Okay. No, perfect. And I think that's probably the perfect place to wrap this one up. So, no, thank you very much for that, Dave. Really do appreciate it. And thanks very much for your time. Do you want to just give us a quick shout out for your service accommodation business? I know you're not that hands-on in it, but give that a shout out.
Yeah, I suppose if if you're looking for a stay over in Chester or on the North Wales coastline, then Noki Stays is our business. That's NOKI. Come and give us a shout. We've got 80 odd properties now, ranging from studios up to 7-bedroom houses and apart hotels. So they're all pretty much full at the moment because we've got pretty good business all the way to the end of November. But there are a few spaces. So if anybody's looking for a time away in Chester or the North Wales coast, hit us up.
Lovely. And as for Trinity Avenue, I know that's full, but still, if people want to have a look at that project, just to understand the scale of it, where would they find that?
You can go online. You can look me up. If you look up Dave Goodfellow Official on Instagram, or just Dave Goodfellow on Facebook, you'll be able to see. And we've kind of put the journey on there as we've gone through. So if you scroll back a bit, you'll see all the trials and tribulations, but then you'll also see the fantastic result at the end of it.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. But yeah, again, Dave, thank you ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.